Which guitar pick should you take to a protest? Really? Is this really a topic of conversation? It totally is. Yeah, it's completely a topic of conversation. It's very important actually for a situation in which you're playing unamplified, and actually in situations sometimes when you're plugged in. Why is it important? There's two reasons. One reason is you want to be as loud as possible most of the time, or you want your top volume to be as loud as it can be. Playing at your loudest volume all the time just sounds terrible, but you want your top volume to be as loud as it can be for projection on the street or when using a small sound system to reach a crowd. So what about no guitar pick? Also remember that because I'm recording through my phone, that's going to compress the volumes a little bit, so you won't be able to hear so much difference in volume as I can in the room, but I'll tell you. So for example, so that's how loud I can play with my fingers. Let's compare it to using a floppy pick. Here's a floppy guitar pick. I'd say that's about the same, but if it was cold I might prefer to use the pick, because then it won't be kind of hard on my hands when I'm cold. What about the classic Jazz 3 stiff pick? There's quite a significant jump in volume with that one. But what about if we went back to the days when people were playing unamplified, amplification didn't really exist, or if it did, not everybody had access to it. We're probably looking into the world of gypsy jazz. Now, I read somewhere that Django Reinhardt used a button. So here's a button, look at that. And I've filed it down to a point. Let's see, what about that? So again, I think there's a jump in volume. I think there's a richness of tone that you don't get with the Jazz 3 plastic stiff pick. And also I discovered by accident that one of the things that the button can be really good for is because you kind of have to hold it differently. It's so big and stiff, you can't hold it how I normally hold a guitar pick. You have to sort of hold it differently. I'm doing 3 fingers. It's much easier to hit it against the body of the instrument and get this sound, which could be a real help. Now there's a final option which might not be available to you, but it's probably interesting to figure it, it's probably interesting to hear it and figure out if you might want to try and replicate it in some way. That's what I mean. Look at that, what's that? The devil's toenail, possibly? Or at least it seems that way. This was given to me by a genuine gypsy jazz guitarist who'd learned from some of the greats, you know, an older guy who came into a music shop when I was trying out some gypsy jazz guitars and said, "You're not doing that right." And rather than think this is an annoying thing to come and say to me, I listened to him, and he talked more about his experiences in gypsy jazz and showed me this guitar pick that he uses and tried to get me to play with it, and I think he wasn't expecting me to be able to get it, but when I did get how to use the pick, he gave it to me, and this is made from tortoiseshell, genuine tortoiseshell, and you hold it like this, you see, so loads of pick shown to the string, and you're holding it in your fist. So what you're getting there is, rather than what we're used to as guitarists, which is sort of, you know, this motion where you're using your wrist is, it's not that it's stiff, but it is not the thing that the movement is coming from. The movement comes from your arm, so it becomes much more like using a drumstick. And you get this. So in the room, I can tell you that that is louder than the button, but also I think it's got a richer tone. Now that's the final thing. That's one thing that's really important. So, you know, the first thing I've talked about is just volume, just literally volume. And you know, the harder you play, the better it can be sometimes to come towards the bridge. That's not a rule of thumb, actually. Just try different parts of your instrument and find out where you're getting the best tone and the best the best volume and the best tone. But the other consideration is essentially tone, but not necessarily good tone, but type of tone. So imagine you're playing in the street. That street will have a particular acoustic, and it might be that there's a certain brightness of sound that comes out and carries in that particular street, and when you get it, you'll hear it. So what's good is to have an access to a variety of different tones. So when you come to play, if you're playing unamplified, you've got to take advantage of that. Good buskers know how to do this. So you might sort of experiment, see how much difference of tone I'm getting before I get too far and actually hit the bridge. And you'll just find the right tone for that particular environment, and then your sound will come out clear as a bell, really nice and resonant. But it might be that it needs to be a brighter tone. So this special gypsy jazz pick that I've got might not be the best for certain streets. It might be that this less rich, slightly brighter tone that comes from the button, that might be ideal for certain streets. It might be different on different instruments. Ooh. So I actually think that my ukulele sounds probably better overall with the button, but I think that my 3/4 size guitar, I think that sounds better with the gypsy jazz pick. So spend some time experimenting and getting that right. What I haven't quite expressed is that this can also be a really useful thought process to go through when you're playing amplified. And the reason for that is that quite often at protests there are quite basic sound systems with either no mixer or no time, really, very little time to mix a sound. So you can mix your own sound by being able to choose a variety of tones as you play. So if I play and I think, oh, this is a really bright sound, I might choose to go back to my fingers, and therefore give myself a bit of a richer tone. I might not use my nail at all. There we go. Or if I think, well, this is a bit dull, then I'll think, well, I'm going to have to come back to the bridge and make a brighter tone. And so you kind of do your own mix on the street and make sure that your sound comes through really nicely by just doing it with your fingers, just with your hands and with your guitar pick. So there we go, 7 minutes on guitar picks. I hope that you felt that was worth it. I certainly did.